Vietnam, 1966. America's involvement in the war is rising. By year's end, the number of American troops in Vietnam would climb to 400,000. In February of that year, a lone vigilante reconnaissance jet climbed into the clear blue sky over the Gulf of Tonkin on a mission to photograph bombing targets in North Vietnam. One jet with one fighter escort heading in harm's way. Navy pilot Gerald Coffee and navigator Bob Hansen Jr. looked forward to a routine run followed by some promised R&R, rest and recreation, in Hong Kong. Coffee had no way of knowing his quick reconnaissance mission would last 7 years. Gerald Coffee was about to trade the freedom of flying for the confinement of a 3-foot by 6-foot North Vietnamese prison cell. But in that time, he would gain a deeper understanding of victory.
We reached the outskirts of Hanoi, and that early morning continued on right down to the very heart of Hanoi, and pulled up in front of this huge, formidable-looking fortress of a prison called Hoa Lo, which in Vietnamese means fiery forge. A huge, heavy wooden door slammed behind me. A big iron bolt clanked home in the lock outside. And that cell just reeked of the human misery that had been there before me.
Suddenly what I thought could only happen to the other guy became my reality. No matter how confident we are, none of us is exempt from trauma, from loss, from our world changing instantly without provocation or warning. Even while we cling to the hope that life as we have known it will sustain us, we can begin to find a depth of ourselves we didn't know existed. Imperceptibly at first, the emptiness and panic begin to be soothed by that stranger within. And that stranger is our closest friend. Those were words written by Navy pilot Captain Gerald Coffee in his book, Beyond Survival, in which he tells his story of being shot down in the Vietnam War and spending 7 years as a prisoner of war in Hanoi. It also details his struggles physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually, and how he was able to overcome that ordeal. I came into contact with Captain Coffee's story in a federal prison in New York City in 2002. I was lying in my bunk in solitary confinement when the inmate who was assigned to bring the book card around tapped on my door and asked me if I needed something to read. I just asked him to pick something and slide it through the door, and the book that came through was Beyond Survival, Captain Coffee. I had no idea at the time how much impact this book would have and how it would guide me for the next 9 years of my life. Captain Coffee mentions in the first part of the book, when he's first taken to his cell, that the only real security we have is the certainty that we are equipped to handle whatever happens to us. Too often we try to build strength through position, possessions, family or friends, social and religious rituals, all the outer trappings of which we form our identities. Stripped of them all, we have to draw from what is left our basic sense of identity as human beings. From there, true security is born. That really hit home to me when I was going through my struggles. I know that struggles in life are all relative, right? Probably the vast majority of you out there listening to this have never been a prisoner of war, and hopefully never will be. But in the moment, the struggles that we are going through are real to us, they're traumatic to us, and they affect us all in different ways. What I learned by Captain Coffee's assessment of the situation that he was first in, that he changed the perspective of how he interpreted his incarceration. I've developed what I call the 199 rule in my life, where I understand that 1% of life is what actually happens to you, and 99% is how you react to that. And when I started digging a little bit deeper into Captain Coffee's story, that was what he was trying to get across, that it doesn't matter what life throws at us, because life will throw at us. We live in a fallen world, and in that, even though we hate to think about it, we understand that no one is immune from bad times. No one's immune from serious trauma. And it's not if something's going to happen to you, but rather when. And in that moment, how are you going to cope with it?
And you can bet in those early days and weeks and months, I prayed a lot. But I began to realize that the nature of my earliest prayers was really kind of futile, kind of useless. I seemed to be expecting God to do everything for me rather than taking up an active role to do something for myself. But gradually my prayers began to change, and I stopped saying, "Why me, God?" And I started saying, "Show me, God. Show me what I'm supposed to do with this. What are you preparing me for here? How am I supposed to use this experience? Help me to use it to go home, whatever that might be, as a better, smarter, stronger person in every possible way that I can be. To go home as a better American, a better citizen. To go home as a better husband and father and friend to all my friends. Please, God, help me to use this time productively so that it just doesn't turn out to be a void or a vacuum in my life." And after that realization and commitment, every single day began to take on a new meaning. Because now there was purpose. There were ways to be better and smarter and stronger. New insights again about myself, or about my comrades and the cell blocks around me all those years.
Captain Coffee talks about how to manage this journey, how to get through adversity, and he talks about it in manageable chunks of time. He says, "Loneliness and despair lead the deadly retreat into withdrawal. Time must be taken in manageable chunks, an hour at a time, a day at a time, whatever we can handle without panic. Each step we take down the unknown passageway leads to a door waiting to be opened. Each new door we open moves us through another barrier of fear." And there it is. That's truly the crux of any recovery and healing path that we get on. What I found that hit home to me was the manageable chunks of time. It's no longer looking at your sentence of 6 years, 7 years, your probation. It's no longer looking, what am I going to do 10 years from now? It's about, how do I get through to movie night Friday? It's about, how do I get through to my next kid's birthday? It's the next phone call that I get, because I get one phone call a week. It's how do I get through the small chunks of time, managing those to get me to the next larger chunk of time, to ultimately then get to the very end of the sentence and of my sentencing and beyond. And I think that's where Captain Coffee really, it was probably to me the most refreshing and honest overarching theme of the book, is that he wasn't trying to say, hey, just no matter what you go through, just forget about it. How do you forget about the loss of a child? How do you forget about the loss of a loved one, or a divorce of a true love? Do you ever forget that? And he's not saying that, and that's the beauty of the story. But what he is saying is that with these techniques, when you are taking life in manageable chunks, then you're not going to necessarily forget, but you'll finally be able to forgive, and you'll be finally able to understand that when you get through this adversity, that you're going to come out on the other end a stronger person and a more powerful and productive member of society. No matter what life throws at us, every day is another opportunity to succeed, no matter how big or how small that success is. When Captain Coffee was released, he summed it up this way. He said that, finally we learned that if we are to celebrate, it must be for today alone. This moment, whatever it brings, is the gift. Our celebrations of today create the laugh lines on the face of tomorrow. I don't know what those of you listening may be going through, but what I do know is that when I read Beyond Survival, when I listened to Captain Coffee's story and really dug into what he went through and how I could take his ability to cope in the most stressful of situations and take those techniques and apply them to the struggles and pain that I was going through, it was a very powerful moment for me. The prisoners in Hanoi were able to communicate with one another through a tap code that was basically a modified version of Morse code, where a certain amount of taps corresponded to a certain letter of the alphabet. Each and every night before they went to sleep, they would tap on the wall of their cell a message to the person in the cell next to them. And I would like to leave you with that message today. G N G B. Good night and God bless.